I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah and a really, really prosperous New Year. And you can trust that we, myself and the management team here, will do everything in our power to help you grow your business, both directly and indirectly, in all the efforts and things we do. And for those of you that participate in committees like this and help us as volunteers, thank you from the bottom of my heart and all of my board's appreciation to you. This organization is a great organization because of you, more than anything else, participating and helping us with great ideas and the way you volunteer and the way you bring your passions and dedication to the organization. So thank you from my heart. Have a great morning. You got a great panel today, and I think I'm bringing up Dan. Dan, am I bringing up you? Dan Meredith, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Small Business Council. Today, we actually have a program that is very, very true to me and everything that I'm going through. In the Small Business Council and in this chamber, we have businesses from multi-million-dollar businesses to people who just started a business. The one thing we all have in common is we're all in business or we work for a business. We all go out to networking events like this, and how many times does somebody say, who are you and what do you do? I can't count the amount of versions of stories that I'll give. And sometimes still today, including right now, I don't even know what to say about that in certain situations. So this panel with Doug, Sasha, and Nick is going to be pretty exciting today, and it's free. So I really want you to understand that this chamber offers these kind of programs, educational programs, for free. So excuse me, see, who am I and what do I do? My name is Dan Meredith, and I'm an Allstate agency in Rutherford. So with any further, without waiting any longer, I'd like to bring up Nina Tucker, and she's going to introduce the group. I would like to say, if you haven't put your card into the bucket, they're going to be doing a drawing at the end of this meeting. And Joe's got the buckets down there. You will get a free ad in Meadowlands magazine. That's big. Okay, so if anybody doesn't know what it is, look it up. You'll get a free ad at the end of this. You got it. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Nina Tucker. I'm owner of Noesis Marketing, and I'm here this morning to be our moderator. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, to my immediate left is Doug Brown of Paradigm Associates. He works with senior leaders in organizations that are living through significant disruption in their industry and often some dysfunction in their organization as well. He believes having smarter strategies, more effective leaders, savvy salespeople, and better processes builds organizational capacity. Next to him is Sasha Lalite. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Sasha is the owner of Meta Viable Solutions. Her company brings unique multidisciplinary expertise and best practice tools to businesses to succeed on personal and organizational levels. She's here to share her experiences networking for both a company she worked for and for her own company. And my furthest left is Nick Pascarella, who is the owner of Novomni Group, which is a total technology provider for small business. Nick has been a member of the Chamber for almost 10 years and has lectured on networking at the Chamber on previous occasions and for Small Business Council. So he's a veteran here on this topic, as are our other panelists. So I don't know about everyone else, but when I walk into a networking, or I'm planning on going to a networking event, I'm like, oh, not my favorite thing to do. But let's get ready. But there's lots of ways to do that, and a lot of people may not be aware of that. So my first question to our panelists is, so how should you prepare yourself to get ready to attend a networking event?
You want to start that?
Sure.
I keep it real simple. Something that was, before I started Paradigm, I came out of manufacturing, not sales. So that was a big deal for me in terms of kind of where did my head need to be in order to be able to make this work. And a gazillion years ago, sat in on a session like this, and somebody talked about when you show up at a networking event, don't come as a guest, think of yourself as a host. And that was a game changer for me. If you start to think of yourself as a host, whether you position yourself by the door so that everybody that comes in, you automatically have a chance to meet, or anytime you see somebody standing around by themselves, that you walk up and introduce yourself. If you think about it, as if we were having a party in our own home. As soon as we saw somebody arrive, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that they have a spot to hang up their coat. If they're not familiar with our facilities, make sure that they know where the food or the beverages are and the bathrooms are and all those kinds of things. But we're going to make sure that they feel comfortable. Why not do that same thing? If you think about order of magnitude, 2/3 of people in general are introverts versus extroverts. So there's going to be an awful lot of people who naturally are not going to kind of be out there. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it doesn't matter. But if you think of yourself as a host and making other people feel welcome and start to introduce people, it's not going to take too long before the next time you show up at a meeting, even if it's something like this, people will start to gravitate to you because they know you're a friendly face. The beauty of something like that is then they start to introduce you to other people because they know you're easy to talk to. So that's a mindset that I thought would be helpful right from the beginning.
So I agree with everything that Doug has said. It depends on the type of networking event that I'm attending, but you do have to, I at times get into that introvert mode as well. So you really have to put yourself in that mindset that despite what mood you're in, you know that you're really going in to really just meet people, just be yourself. Sometimes, and we can talk about it later, I have, a strategy as far as who I may want to speak to at the event, or, are there specific educational components that I want to get from the event, and how can I navigate through that to meet those right people. But once I do enter a room, I kind of just go with the flow. I'm a big believer in energy, and you just gravitate towards certain people. And a lot of things is, what is that common denominator? What is that common denominator as far as, just starting a conversation? I've been in rooms where just, you find out someone went to the same university as you or lived in the same town that you lived in, and anything can be a conversation starter, not necessarily what do you do for a living? So just meeting others and just naturally letting the conversation flow and work the room the way you would at any party, not just sit alone, but, be yourself.
Would you talk a little bit more about what do you mean by work in the room?
Working a room. I actually will go up and speak to people, or sometimes you might feel that everybody's already in little circles, but you might overhear something and you might just say, hey, I just heard you speaking about this, I don't need to interject, but I would love to recommend X, Y, and Z, and there's always ways to do it, and there's times where you just wait for the right moment. I'm a big believer in going with the flow, but don't just go and sit by yourself somewhere, and you can do that at home. You can stand by the door, like you said as well. So who's coming, stand by the breakfast bar, so who's coming to grab some food. There's always a straggler that comes in later, so you can grab that person and say hello as well. So.
They gave me this, I don't even know if I need it because I have a very loud voice, but first of all, I really want to commend Dan and Nina and whoever else was involved in assembling this panel, because I think what you'll find is that networking is like people's recipe for, I call it sauce. Some people say gravy. And there's many different types of ways to make it, and it depends on what kind of floats your boat. I have a very different approach that's worked for me for networking. that takes a little bit of the concepts of what the traditional methods are, but just goes a little different route. And what I mean by that is, when your question initially was, how do you prepare? Well, the first thing I do is I find out who else that I know that I'm very good friends with is going to that same event. Because I'm not gonna look to work a room. I'm gonna let the room work to me. What do I mean by that? If you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, it's very easy to engage. Some people, myself, I can talk to anyone anywhere. But there are some people, as the statistics you brought up, that most are introverted. It's like, what do I say? What do I do? And no matter how hard you may try to engage, it's not a natural function. It's just, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward. And yes, don't ever give up on trying to get over that, but in the beginning, when it's awkward, I know, for example, if there's an event, I'm gonna say, Dan, are you going to that event? And Dan goes, yes, I'm going. Great, let's go. So now, here's what I'm exposed to that night, the worst case scenario. Usually if they've got food available, got something to eat, I'm hanging out with a friend of mine, so what am I doing then? I'm building a relationship and getting closer with Dan. And every time I go somewhere with Dan, that relationship, or Willie, that relationship is gonna get stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where you have a relationship that you're hanging out with in a non-business way. Now, if I'm with Dan, well, I don't know Alex. Never met her. But Dan knows Alex. So Alex comes over, Dan, how you doing? How's the family? How's the kids? And I'm standing there because I'm introverted, don't know what to say. And Dan introduces me to Alex. And Alex and I engage because of Dan. So now this is event number 1, it's November. Now there's event number 2, it's December. Dan, you going? Yeah, I'm going. We go, and Alex is there too. And Alex comes up to Dan. But now Alex says, oh, Nick, how are you doing today? Because we met. And now it's January and February. Now all of a sudden we're in April. Dan's in Florida. I'm at an event because now I said, Alex, you going to that event tonight? Because now I know her now. And she goes, yes. So now Alex and I go. And I don't know you, but you know Alex. And it starts. And your network builds. And what happens is, I'm not sitting there looking at, here's a card, got a card, let's have lunch. When I first started, funny story, there's a member here who does a lot of the badges that you see, Marcelo, for those that may know him, from M Awards. And the first event, because I came from corporate, I didn't have a networking, I didn't know, it was my people I worked with for 23 years. And when I started my business, I went to my first event, and I was like, I'm sure many of you do it, and that's just what the traditions are, where it's like, hey, here's a card, got a card, we can do lunch. Maybe we can help each other. Is that familiar? Like, does that usually happen? And what happens is, I found, I was going, Marcelo looked at me one event and said, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm making contacts. I got like a stack of cards, man. I got lunch. And he goes, you're wasting paper. And you know what? What I found out in the first several months of having to enter that world, I gained weight, not clients. So at the end of the day, I stopped that, and I started hanging out with Marcelo, like the situation I said with Dan, and I started meeting people, and growing those relationships. And over time, it took me a year and a half. I didn't get any business when I joined this chamber for the first year and a half, because those relationships were building. But I can tell you this, when they started coming in, it didn't stop. And my business today is a thriving business that has grown pretty much exclusively from the relationships built at this chamber. To the point now where I can, and people who know me have said this, I can sell hats. I mean, I do technology now, but tomorrow, I can sell hats. And you wanna know something? If Dan needs a hat, if Alex needs a hat, if Willie needs a hat, they're buying from me, because that relationship is there. And if you work for a company, and they are paying for you to be a member, well, that's like getting a scholarship at college. Because they're footing the bill, because at the end of the day, I know the chamber, Jim has said this many times, it's not the person, because that's the policy of the chamber. It's not the person, it's the business. No, it's not. It's the person. Because at the end of the day, wherever you go, it's Nick, it's Doug, it's Sasha. It doesn't matter what these people do. I know them well, Sasha recently, but we're involved. And that's how Sasha and I met, at an event. And now we've gotten a relationship. So if you're introverted, you're comfortable because it's like, you may be introverted here, but if you're hanging out with your best friend, it feels a lot more comfortable. So that is a little bit my theory behind that, in terms of how do I prepare? Who do I know that's going?
Nick, let's talk. I always wanted to be in the hat business. Can we talk later on?
You're lucky I don't have a hat on my head right now.
So we heard a few of the mistakes people make when networking. You know, collecting a lot of cards, sitting alone, not talking to anyone. Are there any other things that you've seen that other mistakes people make when, you know, at networking?
Yeah, for me, one of the ones is when you meet somebody for a first time. My question is, why are you going to give them your card unless you've established a reason to give them your card? What drives me absolutely crazy is the chamber, as opposed to other organizations. This chamber is a relationship chamber. It's not a transaction chamber. Meaning that if this is one of those things that you're going to show up once and you're not going to show up for the next year, don't be surprised if a lot of business does not come your way. Because to Nick's point, people have a tendency to watch people and kind of get comfortable with them. In fact, there's actually a science behind that called neuro-linguistic programming, which really speaks to somebody's convincer strategy. What do they need to see or hear or read about or talk about or experience before they'll know that you're real? And for most people, it's not once. Meaning that if I only meet somebody once, I'm not necessarily going to give them the keys to my house and access to all my bank accounts and say, have a nice day. People don't always take that into consideration. So when I see somebody basically doing what I call a drive-by, here's my card, 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 because somebody said, well, get your cards out there, they're not really understanding the purpose of this. The purpose of networking to me is really simple. Or the purpose of a networking event. It's certainly building relationships, as both Sasha and Nick has talked about. But to me, we're in the appointment generating business when we're at a networking event. And I mean that very, very sincerely. If I just show up without having a goal in mind in terms of what I want to come out of that meeting with, the God's honest truth is, yeah, the peanuts will be good and the pastries will be fine, and I'll have a couple of cups of coffee and yuck it up. But I won't get a lot of business out of that. If I go in with the idea in mind that there's 3 people in the room that absolutely need to meet me, and that's an optimistic way of looking at it, I'll be the first to admit. But I'm convinced that there's 3 people in every room that I'm going in that absolutely need what I do. But if they don't know what I do, there's no way we can do business together. So I'm trying to have deep enough conversations with people to begin that relationship process that Nick talked about. But what I'm not doing is hawking cards. What I want to do is find out, is there enough common ground that it would warrant you and I getting together outside of today to continue on? If the answer to that question is no, that's okay. I may be able to introduce you to somebody that's kind of the perfect client or the perfect customer or the perfect candidate for you. That's fine. I'm a big believer of being a go-giver and not necessarily a go-getter. And that's part of the reason why I like this particular chamber so much. But I would say, yeah, keep your cards accessible, but don't lead with your card. Lead with the idea in mind is, does it make sense? Do we have enough common ground or enough common thought to be able to say, yeah, you know what? This really would warrant us sitting down and chatting. And if you broach enough subject matter with people, just by taking, here's a concept, an honest to God, genuine interest in them as a human being, and not, what company they're doing or what product they're selling. But if you think in terms of making a connection as a human being first, to Nick's point, yeah, I'd probably actually buy a hat from him, especially during the winter. But I think that goes a long way. I think the thing that people don't take into consideration is like so many other things in life, attitude is probably 85% of the reason why you're going to be successful. And I really think that's true in terms of the networking business as well. Jimmy?
Can I, if I may add something? So when I first came to the chamber, I left my hospitality business and I came to the chamber, and thank you. And I needed to overcome something as I was taking on a leadership role of this organization. I also wanted to get to know all of our members and learn about them. And so I needed to practice talking to the person I was in front of at the moment. Not let my eyes stray from that person to see the next person that I wanted to see walking behind that person. And I was not good at it at first. Right? Except my zealousness wanted to make sure I touched everybody in the room, but I never really was paying enough attention to the person I was talking to. And one day, one of my board members, who is a wisdom guy, came up to me and said, "Jim, I love you, but do yourself a favor and talk to the person you're talking with." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I watched you and your eyes were at every other person you wanted to speak to, and that person is watching your eyes, because you're looking at them, looking someplace else, and they're saying to themselves, he's really not interested in me. He really doesn't care about me." And I was flabbergasted. I was like, "Oh my God, that's not what I was doing." He was like, "I know, but that person's perception is you weren't going to do this." You can't get to that even beginning part of that relationship if you're not paying attention. Doug said to me, people will do business with people they like, people they trust, and people they can relate to. That's how the relationship gets started. In just about every business. And so the relationship side, and you'll probably never ever again see speed networking done in this organization. Because I personally hate it. I do not like it, right? And so the idea of just speed networking and making a connection in 1 minute and getting somebody's business card is exactly what Doug did. So that's kind of like off our list for networking at our function. It's going to be all about relationship building. But think about that, and also think about practicing it. Right? You got to practice that. I had to practice it. I had to diligently say that when I was talking to you, I'm talking to you. I'm looking at your eyes, you're looking at my eyes, and I'm not going to see what Anthony Iovino's doing, even if he's making faces at me. Right? I'm going to talk to you. Even if it's only for 2 minutes or a minute, I'm talking to you. You need to know that I'm talking to you. Right? And practice that. And we're going to use this room to do things like that. We're going to use this room to help you learn how to speak better in public, to speak in front of a group, right? To do all those things that you might be afraid of. That makes you a little bit uncomfortable with going into a room, sitting alone and stuff. When I go into a room now, if I see somebody standing by themselves, I go right up to them. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Go up to somebody you see standing by themselves, bring them into the conversation. You may not have anything in common with that person, but that person's going to remember you for helping them find their way in our organization. I just wanted to share. I'm sorry.
I have one slight add-on to that. I love speed networking. I love speed networking. I love speed networking when it is directed and there is a specific way that we invite people to reach out. So I don't want you to get rid of speed networking. I think it's great.
All right, then we need to convince me, because I'm not convinced. But okay, well, you can convince me.
Okay, so, I mean, you can do something really silly. You could have people connect on, what's one reason why we shouldn't be talking right now? And, you invite them to do something a little bit different, so they share something about themselves in a unique way. But I love the opportunity to make eye-to-eye contact with one person for a couple of minutes. So, that's me personally.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. I don't think I did that, but thank you. But that was the first time I ever did the speed networking. And what I liked about it, it's not to say that should be the primary way we network with each other, but the idea that you can walk into a room and talk to like 30, 40 people at a shot, and then immediately know that I found just in those conversations 2 or 3 people immediately, rather than and then I think you take that as a stepping stone to build a better relationship, but it exposes you to so many more folks in that.
I have to stand corrected here then. You guys are convincing me, I'm easy.
But I agree.
I just need to be convinced.
And it also, it helps like somebody who might be like a wallflower or something, like it's forcing you to sit down and make that, like, you know, it's exercise, right? It's dating, right? You have to date a lot of people before you find your wife, right? Or, you know, that's just.
Well, being on the ambassador committee, which actually creates the formats for those events, quite frankly, the speed networking with the long tables is the lowest liked rated format of the different themes we try to do every month. But it changes it up. That's why we only do it once, maybe twice a year, but usually once. The point of it though is to your point, it's fast. The only thing a person, in my opinion, should be looking to get out of that 1 minute or minute and a half engagement is not business, not an appointment, not anything other than, I might like this person. Next, I may like this person.
I agree.
So when I'm hanging out with Dan and you're the person I didn't like, going the other way with this one, I'm gonna go, Dan, I'll be right back, I'm getting a cup of coffee. Or on the other way, it's like, oh, and there's a connection. It's to your point, yeah, maybe I have a second date, using your example, or not.
Right.
But that's really, in that environment, because it's chaotic, which it's loud, because unlike even the round table, where maybe one person is saying about themselves, you've got 60 people talking at the same time. But again, what are your expectations? If you're looking for business, an appointment, a connection, forget it, it's not happening. To Jim's point, it's not about that. And if you're looking at a take, which you should never look at anyway, because to go back to your question, the biggest mistake is to expect to take. That's the biggest mistake you can make in networking. Because to Jim's point, nobody's gonna wanna like you, trust you, or do business with you if it's all about, and you know what else I do? I sell this, we do everything. You have a problem with that? No, I can't. Here's a card, let's have lunch. Okay, so that's a big mistake.
I couldn't get a word in.
I'm Tam from Bergen Community College. I do find it interesting, my parents were from the Midwest, but I grew up here in New Jersey, so I had this very kind of like childhood of cultural childhood. And one thing I will say about people from the Northeast, Long Island, New Jersey, Westchester County, people from the boroughs, sometimes.
Let her finish,
It's okay,
Hold on.
Well, is that people from the Northeast don't listen. They're not talking to somebody to hear their response. They're talking to just talk about themselves. People from the Midwest, they really want to hear what you have to say. And I think that's a huge mistake we make here, and I do it too. But we have to really kind of take a step back and be, as Eckhart Tolle says, stay in the present, listen to the conversation, because you're not going to build a relationship. And as a single woman for many years, you're not going to get a second date. If you're with a man, it's just blah, throwing up all over you about how great he is. Like, you're really, because we're thinking, you're really not. So maybe, sorry, no, a little humor on Friday. It's Friday the 13th. So maybe you kind of take some of those concepts into networking, and I think it's really important that we do listen to one another. And men, I'm sorry, you can hate me if you want, but men are very visual, and they are always darting around the room. I find that when I'm networking with women, you're more engaged, and you're actually looking at the person and listening to what they're having to say. So it is a little bit more, and he's moving around now, I'm getting him like that. So, you know, it's like, and thank you all for you know, taking this so well. But I think it's just some of my own observations, and I think that's important that we can share observations, and thank you all very much. And happy holidays.
When's your flight back to the Midwest?
I live in Jersey.
Doug, I'd like to take the next 20 minutes and make a rebuttal over that. What I was going to say is we're new members here. We've been a member of the chamber for years, but I've just started coming to this. And I find that speed networking, not knowing people as I walked in, was a tremendous way to just meet people. You know, hi, how are you? So that the next time I was here, now I know people. You know, yeah, we said hello, how are you, kind of thing. You know, am I going to make a presentation in 2 minutes? Nah. Am I going to do an elevator speech in 2 minutes? Nah. But hi, how are you, kind of thing. And I thought it was absolutely great, so.
Awesome.
Those are my sense of the deal.
Thank you.
And I was just getting comfortable, I wasn't fidgeting.
You know, these seats are really actually comfortable, so. These are awesome.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if this is it on?
He turned it off for
He
you.
turned it off.
I turned it off. I apologize.
I don't know if it's on.
Probably lit up and it's on.
I'll fix it.
I don't know. I don't even know.
No, it's not on.
It's on.
You have a ladder.
Is
I'll
this
put
thing
that
on?
This thing's on.
I'll take this
Take
one,
that.
Dan. Thank you, Dan. Hi, I'm Andrea from Andrea Pass Public Relations, and I'm a newer member. So, on top of what Tam was saying, certainly listening and taking the time, but in the environment of the speed pitching, it was so loud I couldn't hear the person across the table. And no disrespect if any of you were the people that I met that day, but I honestly can't remember because the people I was talking to were monopolizing the 2 minutes, so I got about 15 seconds, and it all happened so fast and so loud that I couldn't absorb it. And I think that what's important as we all get to know one another is that opportunity to get to know one another and to be able to share things that we have, and that's what building a relationship is about. And I know, having just started my business a year and a half ago, and all of the clients I've had at the beginning and really to now are people that I've known for a long time that have referred me or who I met through something. That relationship building is what's key. So I think that part of networking is taking that time to have a conversation and get to know the other person across the table and devote yourself to those 2, 5, 10 minutes to that person across the table. And remember, I don't know what you do, and I'm not an expert at what you do, and you are not an expert at what I do. So I had a network situation last week where the woman sitting next to me proceeded to tell me that she knew everything about public relations, which of course she did not. And finally I said, good luck to you, I'm sure you're going to be on national television soon. So let's give each other some time to get to know one another, because you all in this room have an area of expertise that I do not have. And I hope that I have an area of expertise to share with you that you do not have. So I'm looking forward to networking at more events in different formats, because I think this is quite a valuable organization, so I'm excited about that.
I think the more, that's great. I think the moral of the story is, and getting back to your comment, was that the structure of that needs to be in a way that makes it so. Let's not make this conversation about the structure of the networking. We'll leave that to the ambassadors to figure out. But I think we need to structure it in a way that speed network. It's obvious that that multiple people found some benefit to it. Let's make sure it's structured in a way that we can have that benefit and reduce the chaos. So we'll do that in the future. So continue with this.
To add to your point, Andrew, the other mistake I think people make is they assume long-term that relationship, because to Doug's point, we are here to make relationships and grow our business, but you assume that you are focusing on a person where there might be a synergy with your business. By nature, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you network every minute from the time you open your eyes in the morning to the time you go to sleep. When I go to Dunkin' Donuts and get my large French vanilla with milk and sugar, and I've been going to the same one for years, I walk in the door, it's on the counter, because they know me. Now, in my business, as a technology consultant, you would not think that there'd be any connection whatsoever to get business out of that person. And there may not be. But you know what? That person may know somebody that has 14 computers in an office and a network that has to be done. And my pal Nick does just that. So the point of a mistake, do not assume that every person that you engage with and build a relationship is basically an advertising platform for your business. And that's why, as well as, again, you build those relationships, what Jim and Doug said, trust, credibility, like you. Those are the things where you don't know where it's coming from. I got a major account from somebody I never did one bit of work for, because the friend of theirs was in a jam, and he said, you want me to call my guy? Called me up, and of course you got to deliver. That's the bottom line all the time. But because of that, and I know this person 10 years, other than some advice here and there, never did a stitch of business for him. But he got me a major client because of that relationship. So keep in mind, we're all networking all the time.
Right. All right, so Steve Bloom, LDI.
So when we go to networking events, whether it be from Tuesday night or the monthly meeting or some of the panels, especially for people who are newer to the chamber, we don't really know anybody. So the speed networking, I think, is still once or twice a year would be great. But I think for somebody who is on the introverted side, as well as doesn't really know anybody, to have that home base to be open and ready to go, great. An opener is the, hi, I'm Steve. So who are you and what do you do? It's, as you said, it's typical. But now, as we all understand that we need to present ourselves as, what can I do for you? Because, the BNI-ism of givers get, right? And it's true. But then in presenting yourself, because the same question is going to come back, well, what do you do? How do you do that without coming across like you're selling? Because that's not what you're supposed to do.
Well, for
Does that make sense?
For me, if somebody asks me what I do, I'll say I'm a technology consultant. For a small business, from network to computers to websites to whatever it might be. But then I'm going into a conversation that's not on an initial meeting related to that anymore. I'm letting them know what I do. And for those that have met me and know me, people who know me know my passion is I do community theater on the side. That's my passion. Could be something else for someone else. I talk more about my theater than my business. In fact, if I got your email, you're probably going to get things like my show is opening tonight. If you're on my contact list. Not, by the way, we have a sale on our technology consult. I never use it. I have an email campaign for that. So to your point, I'm talking about my interest, and it's like, what do? You golf? I'm trying to get that because my goal, I have never solicited any business at a networking event in 10 years. Ever. I don't advertise. I'm a web consultant. I got 2 web developers. I can get my site built. For those that know me, I had a partnership that dissolved a couple of years ago. The website we had went with that person, okay? I get a landing page. I'm a technology consultant. That's all I got. You know why? Because I don't need it. I could use it. I don't need it. Because business comes from those relationships. And I don't have the time to put together content. So I'm talking about interesting stuff. And if you don't know anyone, if you're a new member to the chamber, you don't know anybody, so you can't go with a friend to this event, that's where the ambassador committee, which is unique to this chamber, is available, where it's like, who is my ambassador? Because what the ambassador is going to do, it's going to be a forced relationship start where they're going to make you feel comfortable if you are introverted.
Sasha, before you go on, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. So same thing as Nick, where I would just say, yes, I'm a business management consultant, and I also do coaching, but I'm very much interested in people's journeys. I just love to hear about, how did you get into what you got into, or just other interests as well. So that's always a way to kind of bounce back and have a conversation that's not just, business focused. And I also have my creative side, like Nick, where I talk about my jewelry design
right.
more than my business. But then you find out that people have other, creative avenues, and you have a lot of. I'm meeting more like-minded people on my entrepreneurial route because we're not necessarily doing one thing. We're all multi-talented, multifaceted, human beings. So you spark those conversations, and I was sitting next to someone the other day that was like, I love yoga, I love this, and then you end up finding out other interests, and you start bonding over other relationships. And like Nick said, you're not necessarily going to get that business from that person, but you never know who knows who. It's like a web, and by actually someone getting to know you, you are the face of your business. It's not cold calling or anything else. You're actually making connections with people, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Just I really want to build on that one. One of the things that I try to do, and I don't even know what got me in the habit of doing this, because I basically started the business in '85, so I've gone to a lot of meetings over the years. But I try to ask questions during a conversation that are not just going to be, oh, these are your stock networking questions. even if I'm trying to get to some of the information that would be part of a stock networking question, I want to ask the question in a non-traditional way. And I'm doing that because I really want to have an honest-to-God conversation with you, not just a transactional conversation. So I just as one example, I might ask you, what do you do when you're not hanging out? What do you do when you're not hanging out at a chamber meeting? Now, you wouldn't believe the number of different answers that I've gotten to that. Sometimes people will talk about what they do for a living, but I could potentially ask that question to Nick, and he would immediately go into his theater business or his theater avocation, because that's something that's really important. Or Sasha may immediately start to talk about jewelry business. So not everybody's going to answer that question the same way. But to me, it really starts the opportunity to have a real live conversation. As I said, this is all about relationships. It's not about transactions. And to capitalize on that, I think is just, if you're truly interested, years ago there was somebody who did a tremendous amount of questions in terms of interviewing people on the stage. Larry King, for those of you who are old enough to remember that name. And somebody once asked Larry, how much prep do you do on every guest before you start talking to them? And his answer surprised me. His answer was none. And that kind of shocked the interviewer and said, well, so what's the story behind that? He said, I've just got kind of a never-ending curiosity about what makes people tick. And if I do too much prep on somebody before I start to ask them a question, I'm going to start taking them down a path that I want them to go on rather than the path that they want to tell me about. And I just thought that was brilliant in the simplicity. So if you just have an honest-to-God, genuine interest in who you're talking to at the moment, and not looking for who might be 5 more people that you can, give a card to before you walk out, I think that goes a long way. You have a comment or a question?
Yeah, comment. So I just want to agree. First of all, I want to tell you that something really weird just happened. My eyelash came off. And so I was going to tell you that I put on my sunglasses because the light was bothering my eye, but my lash fell off, so I'm going to look like a total idiot without my glasses. But one of the reasons I'm saying that is I think, in part, when you meet someone new, if you can be a little bit vulnerable, so I just took a risk in looking like an idiot and telling you that, but if you can be a little vulnerable, I think that makes a difference. But I also want to build on what you said, Nick. About 2 months ago, I did an experiment. I went to the banking lady, Jessica. She's got her own little network thing that she does. And I went there and I took a risk of introducing myself from something I feel a lot of excitement about, and that's dancing tango. And so my guy and I created a little tango organization. It's totally free and we're just building a community. I got so much interest in Club Tango, far more than anybody wants to know about what I do for marketing or what I do in my coaching. It didn't matter. The Club Tango was like, oh, that's exciting. And a whole bunch of people came to our event. And it was like, wow. They raised their hand for that more than they raised their hand for my business. And I think that is how you make connections with something very personal that you feel passionate about. I know you through your acting. That's how I know you. I met you like probably a year and a half ago. And that's what I know about you. And I know you're interesting and exciting. And that's why I would want to work with you.
Shucks.
Don't take it. But no, I do. I mean that. And John, when we first came, he said, "Oh, you have to meet Nick because of your acting." So we have to connect on a more personal level. I just think that's terrific. So it was just fascinating to me how much interest I got in my, avocation, more so than my vocation.
I'd like to, if I can, I want to get back to your question. Yes. So, thank you.
I think your original question was, how do you, when you're having a conversation with someone, how do you get to kind of tell them what you do without kind of force feeding that to them? And I think that comes from a genuine conversation. I think what you heard here today a little bit is about talking about something other than what you do so you can get to what you do, right? And something that's worked for me is I'll always ask someone
what I can do for them. And, you know, in this, you know, in the chamber world, if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, who's your best type of client? What's your target, you know, industry sector or something like that? And we start talking. And human nature, if the person is at least a reasonable giver, human nature is if you're asking them how you can help them, the next part of the conversation is, well, how can I help you? What do you do? What's best about what you do? So you can get to that. And again, it's that give to get, right? You know, and I even say to Lauren, relative to membership development here, don't bring me any takers. I don't want a taker. I don't want their check. I don't want their membership. They're too high maintenance for us to manage. They come in for the two things, they didn't get into business. They want to tell me all the things that we're not doing right. I don't want it. I don't want a taker. I want givers. That's the kind of people that we want to grow in our organization. But take that concept and philosophy is you got to be able to share that, right? That person's got to believe that you're genuinely asking about how you can help them, and then that just breaks down any of the cold barriers, and then they genuinely want to help you. And if they don't get to that, I don't know that I want a relationship with that person anyway. Because if they're only worried about themselves and they don't get to, well, how can I help you? Chances are they were taken. Right? And I don't know that I want that. It's the next step in that relationship.
To build off of that, when I start a conversation, what I'm really looking for is enough common ground. So for example, as a business consultant myself, what I'm finding, what I'm thinking about is, are there aspects of what's going on, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's in your professional life, that I've already worked with somebody to solve? And if the answer to that question is a legitimate yes, I'll say, you know, I've worked with X number of architects, or I've worked with X amount of IT people, or I was talking with Andrea before, I literally have worked with PR and government affairs and public relations professionals over the course of my 35 years. That's the one advantage of being old. So I've got a lot of common ground that I can kind of draw on. But as a result of that, I can say, would it be helpful if you and I just, kind of set up a time to get together outside of today? And if they say no, that's okay.
I'm saying yes.
but a lot of times they'll say yeah, and at that point, the only other mistake when we're talking about mistakes is somebody agrees to meet with you. With the technology being today, I take instant action, and I'll literally ask them, do you have your phone with you? Because so many people today have a phone with them.
He asked me that the first time I ever met him, just so you know, and that was 4 years ago. So you really do that.
Pretty consistent on that. And say, do you happen to have a calendar on your phone? Yeah. And I will literally set that appointment right on the spot. Because if I say, oh, good, you and I'll get together, then one of us has to start playing phone tag with the other, and I don't know how much you really enjoy the game of phone tag. I do not, particularly on times when, quite candidly, I'm really busy, and having one more phone call to try to return or to generate is really not the first priority for me. So I'd much rather be saying, what's your calendar look like? What week do you want to start looking at and start it? And the other thing is, among other things, if you happen to have an iPhone, for those of you who do, learn how to use AirDrop. Because if the person that you're talking to has AirDrop, you can get all their contact information into your phone instantly, and it makes it even easier to get that calendar invite locked in. And the other thing, just from a personal perspective, I always make sure that I put my cell number in the calendar invite, because every once in a while an honest to God emergency will happen, and I want an easy way for people to be able to call me and say, Doug, I'm so sorry, but I got to reschedule. That came the hard way. A colleague of mine and I drove 2.5 hours into New York State to find out, oh, the guy had just earlier that morning had gotten called in New York City to deal with a major client issue, and they didn't have an easy way to contact us, and we basically did a 5-hour tour of New York City up and down. And that's kind of always prompted one other thing, just it doesn't have anything to do with networking, but just in terms of running my business. If I have more than a 45-minute drive one way, you're always going to get a text or a message from me that says I'm en route. Because I don't mind screwing around with an hour, meaning, okay, I drive someplace for 15 minutes or half an hour and you're not there and I drive home. I am not about to waste an hour and a half or 2 hours or anything north of that. So you'll always get a text from me that basically says, en route to you now. Because if it's not gonna work out, I'm not in the business of burning up gas and car tires. So that's just kind of a couple, they're mechanical, but hopefully they're helpful.
Got a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. First time here, I love it already. So this is a challenge that I encounter sometimes when I do a lot of networking, in events and so on. And we are in audiovisual production business, so for live events and so on. It's meeting someone, we have to go into a lot of depth into what we do because it's a niche market. So it's very deep into discussions of what you exactly do. And that's really, it really leads into a deeper discussion than just selling hats or showing the catalog and the prices and doing such things. Excuse my French.
Even though you spoke French.
And therefore, when I meet someone and that person, I can sit with you and explain to you what we do, the person, I've been talking to you for 10 minutes and they say, oh, we don't do events, I'm sorry. So like, this is good for relationship building, but in terms of wasting time, I'm just not really wasting time, but just not hitting target to some points. And we meet a lot of people, and if I find one person out of 100, that's good. But it takes a lot more from us to network and go into deep explanations because it's very technical, as you may know. So what do you guys recommend? What do you advise?
I'm gonna answer that.
So just to one point, for the speed networking, it works better to our benefit, because once we say what we do, people come to us who know the business, who know what they need in terms of what they need into production and so on, as opposed to us trying to explain to people and just keep talking and then it's just going nowhere.
Again, if
Thank
you
you.
have a high tech or very a niche market that takes a lot of explaining to what you do, or if you have something in addition to that is high ticket, where a lot of people initially in that 10 minutes, 15 minutes are going to say, I don't, and you're shut down right there. If you are building a relationship with me where it's like, what do you do? I do, even if you do such a general statement, what's going to happen? And then start talking about things outside of that, as we talked about. That relationship will build to the point where I'm going to want to sit and listen to your 30-minute explanation of what you do because now I know you for you. Or, if I'm really interested in it, I'm going to start asking you questions. Well, what exactly is that? And you'll give another little teaser. It's the reason why movies have trailers. It's a slow burn, it's a slow build. An actual case in point. I was working on a major project doing a network thing, and there was a company that was also working for what they do, very high ticket, incredible stuff, called Danker. And we got together, and because we were working on this job. And I was talking the praises of the Meadowlands Chamber. They weren't a member. And they joined. And I think you'll see their name quite a bit around here because they were responsible for a lot of the tech in here. So, because we got along and we talked, and because I believe in the chamber, I bleed, well, blue now, right? But they joined. That initial conversation led to them getting involved, and they've gotten a lot of business from this chamber. Not just the chamber itself, but from the chamber. Because of that initial dialogue, because of that initial relationship. I didn't do any business with them. In fact, I didn't even refer that. I got them here. You don't know where life's path takes you. But one of the biggest things you want to do, especially going back, because one of the most, if you're comfortable and you're extroverted, this stuff is easy, it's just tweaking it. But when you're introverted, or if you don't know anybody, it's what are the shortcuts? Get to know somebody. And this chamber offers resources, ambassadors. That's a resource not many other chambers, if any, have, at least in the area. Another resource is be visible. For example, everybody can see us, right? You all can see us. Can you see them? The answer is no, you got to turn around. Because we're visible. There's committees.
And what committees do, you could be the most shyest, introverted person sitting around a committee table of 4, 6, 8, whatever the size of the committee is, small business council, because there's a lot of knowledge that you get for free. That's another resource the chamber had. But if I'm sitting there, because I'm shy and I'm quiet, I don't know anything, and I'm sitting next to Sasha for these meetings all the time, we're gonna connect. Now, whether or not we like each other to connect any further, then I'll go sit next to Doug. But the point is, it's an environment that's not forced, that you can feel it out and be visible, because as a committee, you're visible. If you're a member, you're only visible at an event, you're only visible to the people sitting at your table or in your circle. When you're a committee creating something, like Dan does, like Nina's, they're visible. They're not even on the panel, they're visible. So be visible. Even if you're not saying anything, be visible.
Nick, how do you know who your ambassador is?
If you don't know, because usually they're assigned, if you contact the chamber office and speak to Alex, she'll be able to tell you exactly who it is.
And yet the other ambassadors would still be more than happy to help you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you guys to be vulnerable for a minute. So we hit on a couple of things about not feeling comfortable and being shy when you walk in a room. I'm going to ask you to think for a second. I'm going to tell you my vulnerability, and then I'm going to ask you to raise your hand because of how many people feel not comfortable when you come to a networking event. What do you need to overcome? So my vulnerability is when I speak in public, and over the years I've learned to be comfortable with it, so I'm no longer uncomfortable speaking in front of any room. And I'm told I'm fairly good at it, but I worry about not sounding like, you know, my Brooklyn accent, and I'm talking like, you know, a wannabe mafia guy. Because that's not professional for me. And so, and I know that when I see myself doing an interview, I was like, God, I sound like Tony Soprano, stop that. And so I worry about that all the time, and I'm conscious of it, so I try to practice. So that's my vulnerability that I still work on today. Who's got a vulnerability that you're willing to share when you walk into a room? Dan.
You guys saw it happen to me this morning. I have that problem. It's an ongoing problem, and sometimes it'll smack me in the face, and sometimes I don't have it. But I will clam up sometimes in front of a room, and I will talk like Tony Soprano. And I don't mean it. It happens. So that is my vulnerability right there. You hit that right on the head.
So the only way to overcome that is to be visible, be involved, and practice it, right? At the committee level, so that you can just be a little bit more fluent. And then, listen, I am who I am, and my dialect may change some. It may not change too much more than it is after speaking as much as I've spoken in the last 17 years here. And so, but it's conscious. It makes me think about my vocabulary. It makes me think about my choice of words. It makes me think about pausing when I'm talking. It makes me think about maybe being a little prepared this morning about what I want to say and so forth. And Doug Brown has helped me become a better professional with those types of things. So, but it's practice, right? Who else? Who else has got a vulnerability?
My biggest vulnerability is when I know I'm going to a brand new event where nobody I know is going, like a whole new area. For instance, I started networking out in Livingston. I know no one in Livingston, but I knew I needed to open up this market. So I found out about some events, and I walked into the room, and knowing I knew no one, I needed to figure out where to place myself and who looked like the right person to place myself in front of. How do you figure that out?
Trial and error.
Right, but that's where I literally was like a deer in the headlights. For me, it felt like it was an hour, but it was probably 30 seconds. But I just stood in the door thinking, now where do I go? You know, so that's my vulnerability. Now I'm okay, I'll walk up to anybody. I mean, I've never had that problem, but every now and then, that's my biggest vulnerability is where do I place myself and how do I say, hey, I'm Kimberly Johnston. You need to talk to me. Like, I just feel like I'm pushing myself.
Hold your answer to her. Let's get a couple of vulnerabilities out, and then you guys can answer those vulnerabilities.
I'm glad to know you didn't.
This gentleman right here.
You said hello to me.
Anybody?
Right behind you.
They already told me you can't see behind you.
The youngest guy in the house.
Well, hello everyone, my name is Miles Scally. If I had to introduce a vulnerability of mine, it would probably be along the lines of considering myself a terminal student. And what that basically means is every single one of you in this room knows something that I don't. And I'm not afraid to admit that, but this is kind of a very risque thing where you're balancing on this fine line of seeming like you want to grow and learn more, and ultimately just shooting yourself in the foot because you look like you don't know anything. So it's more of like trying to ask questions, but trying not to ask the wrong questions to make yourself look like you're missing something in the conversation, and that's probably something I need to work on myself a little bit more.
Well, my vulnerability is related to my job, which is setting up microphones, setting up stages and so on. So I do set up, our team does microphones, and when they ask me to go up on stage and speak on the microphone, I can't. I just can't. I just like I'm afraid of doing this. I'm shaking, as you can see.
Well, you're doing it really well.
You see, I'm kind of nervous.
But you're not actually coming across nervous.
Right.
You don't appear to be nervous to me.
I think it's a setting itself of some sort. We get honored sometimes by clients on stage and just jump on stage and run back. I can't just stand there in front of people. I mean, it's just nature of probably doing for others, but I can't myself do it. That kind of thing. I don't know whether it's a psychological thing.
We're gonna get you in front of this microphone a few people a few times, and we're gonna break that from you.
Thank you.
So, how do I say this? I'm not good about bragging about myself, and I didn't even realize how bad it was until I'd been in a therapy group for a year, and I became friends with one of the people in the group, and she said, Sharon, nobody knows what you do. Nobody knows all this stuff that you have. And, you know, they're not taking you seriously because you don't let people know your strengths. And I didn't even know that I didn't do that. So I don't, you know, like I've got huge bragging rights. I don't use them, and I feel, you know, like it's not nice to brag. So that's a vulnerability.
Oh, I think that's definitely a woman thing. I keep bringing that up today.
It's all right, you're allowed.
Why? I don't usually do that, but I do think sometimes women do have maybe a little bit harder time boasting about themselves. That's all. I'm sorry. And I won't bring up another gender thing.
Cameraman, Earl Peterson, Placement Productions. Sometimes I talk too much. I'll meet somebody and I'll be nervous and I just won't shut up and I won't hear the person.
Okay, guys.
Actually, yeah, I had one. I don't need Mike, I'm like Nick. I think this is gonna sound like such a weird thing, but it comes up obviously in networking, is the eye contact thing. Like Jim was talking about before about he's looking over here, he's looking over there. That's not my issue. I just feel like if we're stuck in this deadlock stare for more than 30 seconds, this is getting weird.
Yeah.
Like, why are we just so intently staring at each other? We can still talk and not be so fixated on each other's eyes. So I think that's what's always been my issue. I start looking at the mouth and the nose because I think the eye stare thing gets really weird. So.
Again, that's a practice. So for me, I think that's a practice.
It just feels weird, like, hey, going out.
So, I mean, I have a unique vulnerability, I guess. I always go into these events thinking I'm not an attractive customer, and that whoever I'm talking to is going to figure that out and not want to talk to me.
Oh.
Will your check clear?
Oh no, my check is clear. I just always assume I don't have any need. Like, I don't know why, but I assume I have no need for any of your businesses. Like, it's weird, and that you're going to figure that out, and you're not going to talk to me.
But that's where it's a relationship and not just a transaction.
That goes back to what I said earlier, where if they're smart, because we go back, I know you, and yeah, I may not have a synergy directly with your organization, but you know what? We're good friends. We go to a lot of the same things. If that person over there, who I never met before, has a need, you're my billboard. So anybody that doesn't talk to you is missing the boat if they don't have a direct sale, for lack of a better term.
I actually
So my vulnerability is public speaking and being more visible. So I started actually with the chamber in May, I think it was. And one of the first people that approached me was Willie, and I believe in mentors versus advocates. And so I've met advocates along the way who have really pushed me to be more visible. Even standing up and giving my pitch, I used to hate going around the room and have to stand up and do that. But it was Willie who pushed me to go to different events and get me more visible. And just sitting here today, it was Nick and Dan who was like, you have to join the panel. And I'm like, I don't know. But, I mean, I know that it's a personal goal of mine, but also a business goal where I do know I have to, you know, get up and inspire and start, you know, impacting people in the business that I do. So,
Are you uncomfortable at this very moment?
Yeah.
I think
Now
that-
she is.
You don't seem it.
I think
Nope,
we're most
let's put it in
critical
the
of
go.
ourselves, right? When we go and we watch a video of ourselves, and I've led huge meetings before, and everyone's like, Sasha, you handled yourself well, why are you being so hard on yourself? So I think we're hardest on ourselves. But, you know, this was very much a push out of my comfort zone, and that's just been a personal, you know, growth goal of mine. And through a networking event, I actually met someone. It was through lunch. I found an extra plate for her, and because she couldn't find a plate for lunch, and she holds symposiums, and she asked me to speak at a symposium in January. And it's terrifying me, but I know I'm supposed to go to that next level and start doing it. So, you know, I think it's.
You said something that was really, really helpful to me in the early years here, is videotaping yourself and learning from that. I still do it to this day. I'll watch an interview that I'll do with Steve Adubato or something like that, and I'll look at it and to try to look at myself. Was I slouched? You know, how did I look? How did I come across? Hand language, not enough hand language, sitting on my hand, feeling like I was that still happens to me, and yet I'm comfortable in front of a camera, and I'm comfortable in front of a room, but yet I'll still look at a video of me speaking. So continue to do that. It's really, really helpful.
And another tip, if you don't have an opportunity to have a video, talk to yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
Make
Yeah.
eye contact with yourself and stand in front of the mirror. It's the most awkward thing anyone could do is to look at themselves like that. But it will give you that confidence to be able to talk about your topic, and keep in mind you know more about your topic than everyone else does. They're learning from you.
And also use your cell phone. You can just videotape yourself, just prop it up and literally do it 100 times, because you'll see things that are like, oh, I hate that. I'll say like too much or things like that. And I picked it up by videotaping myself doing my little speech.
I just want to say one thing about that. Before I had this company that I have now, I used to do consulting, and I used to speak in front of large groups, and it was, this is a vulnerability or whatever you want to call it, but I used to like speak at like conferences in Vegas and stuff. There'd be hundreds of people in the audience, and I would be utterly, no matter how many times I did it, I would be utterly terrified for like half an hour beforehand. I was like nauseous, and then once I started talking, I was fine. And no matter how long it went, it never got better. But that's not actually the thing I was going to mention. What I was going to mention was, but along the lines, what I was going to say is that to your tip, I definitely recommend to, you know, record yourself and then practice and get that feedback. But don't do it too soon, because I literally used to have a webinar that I used to host, like every single month, and I would record it so I could check it out later. And literally months went by before I actually checked them out. So I was basically, after 6, 7, 8 months, I'm like, I'm getting pretty good at this. That's when I started to like kind of review myself. But then I went back and looked at like my very first webinar, and there were like these big pauses in the conversation, and I kind of was losing. And like, if I had basically said I'm going to record myself and then immediately took feedback from that, I probably would have been like terrified. I probably would have never done the second webinar, right? So I would say absolutely get that feedback from yourself, but like get a little proficient at it first, because if you just like kind of go in like, you know, you're an actor, so I'm sure if you basically saw yourself the first time you were on stage and you had a recording of that, you'd probably be like, I'm never going to act again, right? So you probably need to like get a little confidence in yourself before you start to critique yourself.
You know, it's one thing to critique yourself in terms of criticism. One of the things that I'm a big believer in is the philosophy of failing forward. And if we didn't fail forward, we'd all be still crawling around on our hands and knees. Because when you think about the number of times when we were first learning how to walk, right? You literally have to, you're learning how to walk because you're falling forward and you're catching yourself. And I think if you think about that as long as your intention is that I'm going to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday, then you may be less likely to get mentally shut yourself down. One of the things that I ask people a lot is when somebody says, well, how do I get to blah, blah, blah? The first question that I have to ask them back is, where are you starting from? Because if you say, how do I get to Omaha, I have to know whether you're starting from Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, because there's going to be a different set of directions. But I would say give yourself permission to be wherever you are. Just, you're gonna start from wherever you are. Wherever you are, just answer that, just kind of acknowledge that you're doing that guilt-free. Wherever you are, you are. That's just where you're starting from. That's okay. But because otherwise, you may put yourself in higher and higher level of anxiety when we're really just trying to go the opposite way. What one small thing can I adjust, or one thing can I work on? And if you look at it in a work of progress, as a constant, kind of continuous improvement. I'm certainly doing things differently now than I did when I started in the business in 1985. But I would just say, kind of celebrate that growth. Welcome to the world of human beings.
So just to wind up, Sasha, Nick, do you have any other one minute takeaway before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I can do a quick 1 minute clip, which is surprising, isn't it? Just real quick, if somebody has a problem with what you say and looks down, that's not a relationship you want to build anyway. So your motto should be next, because those are the ones that'll count, because you are young and you have that time. But I guess you all know relationship, that's the big thing for me. So I have a motto, Jim knows it, people that know me know it. When you say hello to somebody and you go, hey, how you doing, and you shake their hand, that's a level of relationship. When I go in and I see Willie, for example, or Dan, we hug. When you're hugging somebody, you're gonna get slack if you make a mistake, because you get slack when people are that close to you. So my motto is to work that relationship, because it's all about the hug. Because when you're hugging somebody's hello, you're getting business. They're trusting you, they're referring you. When you get to that level, and the more hugs you have, the more business you'll get. And you'll also meet a lot of great people along the way. So that would be my 1 minute.
Genuine hug.
Correct. Like, he's a great barbershop quartet Allstate. For those that did not know.
It's for real.
It is for real. I'm not referring to the mustache.
I am.
Sasha, anything to add?
So as someone who just started in my new business, I thought about this like first or second year as planting seeds, and that's kind of how I think about it as far as networking and building relationships. I do believe in reciprocity, and regardless of what relationships you have, just single women, right? So, it's not about just throwing the card, actually find that common denominator or something in common to actually spark that conversation, and it's continuous, because you never know where the next thing will lead, and just to be, patient and just cultivate the relationships.
Do we have time for that one graphic?
Sure.
There's a handout that's going to be coming your way that I basically prepared, not knowing which way this thing was going to go. But when it comes to where to sit in a room, there's actually some strategic places to sit. If you're sitting at a table,
There's the escape key on the computer. Is that project, is that supposed to be on screen? I have it.
so if you're sitting at a traditional square table, if you have a choice, sit in spots 3 or 7, because that you're only going to be one person away from being able to meet and have a conversation with everybody around the table, as opposed to any place else. Would you click to the next line? The next line, please. Or page down. Just hit page down. There you go. So the speaker's up front, and there's 3 sets of tables. You're going to want to be sitting in spots O or P or U or V. Why? Because when you stand up, you can have conversations. Again, you can have conversations with anybody at the front table, and if you turn around, you can have conversations with everybody at the back table easily. So it's just a way of being able to make that as easy as possible in terms of being able to maximize the number of people that you can legitimately say hello to. Thank you.
Another thank you to our panelists, and thanks everyone for coming today. This was a great program, and look for other small business council programs coming up in the new year. And before we leave, we have a draw.
Oh, yeah.
So the value of this show is what, $1,000? About 15.
Wow.
$1,500. Not a bad return on your free seminar.
Scully events.
Oh.
Speech.
It can